If we want to talk about the ultimate path for the middle class to wealth, we have to start where every journey begins, not with money, but with mindset. Because the reality is most people are not trapped by a lack of opportunity. They're trapped by a way of thinking. The middle class doesn't stay in the middle class because of external conditions alone. It stays there because of the internal framework that governs how they see the world. Think about it. The middle class mindset is deeply rooted in survival and security. Go to school, get a good job, earn a steady paycheck, buy a house, save for retirement. That's the formula that's been sold for decades. And at one level, it makes sense. It's a way of minimizing risk. It's about ensuring you don't fall backward. But the problem is that formula rarely allows you to leap forward. It's designed to keep you safe, not to make you wealthy. Philosophically, this reveals a deeper truth. Survival and wealth are two different games. Survival is about preservation. Wealth is about expansion. Survival says, don't lose what you have. Wealth says, multiply what you've been given. The middle class gets caught in the tension between these two games. They desire wealth, but their actions are governed by survival. And when your actions are ruled by fear of loss, fear of failure, fear of risk, you will always settle for security over opportunity. Psychologically, this survival mindset manifests in very subtle ways. For example, middle-class thinking often equates stability with safety. A paycheck feels safe even if it caps your potential. Benefits feel safe even if they keep you tied to a job you don't control. Debt feels dangerous even if the right kind of debt could accelerate your wealth. In other words, the middle-class mindset often confuses comfort with progress. But here's the hard truth: comfort can become a cage. Now, shifting from survival to wealth requires a reprogramming of how you see money. Instead of seeing money as something you earn and spend, you start seeing it as something you direct and multiply. Instead of thinking in terms of, how much can I afford? You start asking, how much value can I create? Instead of seeing risk as something to avoid, you see it as something to manage and sometimes to embrace. Because wealth doesn't grow in the soil of safety. It grows in the soil of vision, courage, and calculated risk. Let's go deeper. One of the defining features of a survival mindset is scarcity. Scarcity says there's never enough time, enough money, enough opportunity. That's why many in the middle class cling tightly to what they have, afraid it will disappear. But wealth is built on abundance thinking. Abundance says opportunities are everywhere, value can always be created, and money is not a fixed pie to be divided, but a resource that can be expanded. The truth is both scarcity and abundance exist, but the one you choose to focus on determines the game you play. And the game you play determines the results you get. If you live by scarcity, you'll hoard, you'll hesitate, you'll limit yourself. If you live by abundance, you'll invest, you'll innovate, you'll expand. That's why mindset isn't a motivational cliche, it's the operating system of wealth. Here's another distinction. The survival mindset thinks in terms of linear growth, work more hours, earn more dollars. The wealth mindset thinks in terms of exponential growth, build systems, create assets, generate cash flow. The middle class often believes effort equals income, but the wealthy understand leverage equals income. This is why two people can work equally hard, but one remains stuck while the other ascends to freedom. And here's what's most profound: this shift is not about intelligence, background, or even education. It's about perspective. The same person with the same abilities can stay stuck in survival or step into wealth, depending on which mindset they choose. The pivot begins when you stop asking, how can I stay safe, and start asking, how can I create scale? But I want to be clear, this isn't about recklessness. A wealth mindset isn't about gambling your future. It's about calculated courage. It's about learning, growing, and strategically stepping into bigger opportunities. It's about realizing that money is not made by clinging to the familiar, but by leaning into the unfamiliar with preparation and vision. So, if you are in the middle class and you want to rise out of it, the first battle is not in your bank account, it's in your mind. Ask yourself, am I making decisions out of fear or out of vision? Am I settling for comfort? Or am I pursuing expansion? Am I stuck in survival, or am I stepping into wealth? Because here's the truth: the line between middle class and wealthy is not just drawn by income brackets, it's drawn by mindset. And once you change the way you think, the way you act will follow. And when your actions shift, your results will begin to transform. So let me leave you with this: the survival mindset may keep you safe, but only the wealth mindset can set you free. If you want to rise beyond the middle class, you must dare to think beyond security and start building for abundance. Safety is about today. Wealth is about tomorrow. And your tomorrow is waiting for you to think bigger today. Once the mindset shifts from survival to wealth, the next step is learning how to create and multiply value. Because here's the truth: money is nothing more than a certificate of value exchanged. Every dollar you have in your bank account came from one simple equation. You provided value to someone and they rewarded you for it. The middle class stays stuck because they confuse activity with value. They think effort itself creates wealth. But effort only creates income when it produces value for someone else. And the more value you create, the more wealth you attract. Now, here's where the philosophical divide lies. The survival mindset focuses on trading time for money. You give hours, you get wages. But that exchange is inherently limited because time is finite. True wealth begins when you stop trading time and start trading value, when you shift from how many hours can I work to how much value can I create. You step into a new arena. That's the moment your income stops being capped by the clock and starts being expanded by creativity. Think of it this way: a janitor and a CU can both work 8 hours in a day. Both can exert effort. Both can sweat. Both can give their best. But one gets paid in hundreds and the other gets paid in thousands or even millions. Why? Not because of effort, but the janitor's work, while important, can be replaced easily. The CEO's work, leading strategy, vision, and direction, creates value at a scale that multiplies the organization's future. Value is not about working harder. It's about solving problems that matter at higher levels. Psychologically, this requires breaking out of the middle class trap of thinking more hours equals more money. Instead, you ask, what problems can I solve and for whom? Money flows towards solutions. If you solve small problems, you'll make small money. If you solve big problems, you'll make big money. The world doesn't reward you for effort, it rewards you for impact. But here's where multiplication comes in. Creating value is the first step. Multiplying it is what builds wealth. When you create a product, a system, or an idea that can serve not just one person but thousands, you're multiplying value. That's how a book sells to millions. That's how a software program reaches entire industries. That's how an online course, once created, can generate income for years without requiring additional hours of teaching. Multiplication is the bridge between middle-class effort and wealthy results. This is why entrepreneurship is one of the greatest vehicles for wealth creation. A job allows you to create value for one employer. A business allows you to create value for countless customers. And when that value can be delivered repeatedly through systems, technology, or intellectual property, you break free from the trap of linear exchange. You're no longer limited by how much you can do. You're empowered by how much value you can replicate. Philosophically, value creation is tied to purpose. The wealthiest people in the world didn't just chase money. They chased impact. They asked, what can I bring into existence that didn't exist before, and how will that change people's lives? That's why wealth is often a byproduct of service. The more deeply you serve, the more effectively you solve problems, the more willingly the world pours resources back into your hands. But let's address the fear that often holds people back. Many in the middle class believe they don't have enough to start creating value. They think they need more degrees, more capital, or more connections. But value creation doesn't begin with what you don't have. It begins with what you do. Your knowledge, your skills, your perspective, your creativity. These are raw materials. Wealth is built when you stop underestimating those materials and start shaping them into something that benefits others. Here's a practical lens. Start asking yourself, where do people struggle? And how can I make that struggle easier, faster, or more enjoyable to solve? That's the birthplace of value. Every product used today was born from someone identifying a problem and creating a solution. And here's the key. They didn't just solve it once. They found a way to solve it for many. That's multiplication. So if the survival mindset keeps you trading hours and the wealth mindset teaches you to trade value, the real leap is learning how to multiply that value endlessly. That's when money no longer trickles in, it flows. That's when your income stops being determined by what you can do and starts being determined by how many lives your value can touch. Ask yourself this, are you still living in a world where effort is your currency? Or have you stepped into the world where value is your currency? Because until you learn to create value beyond yourself, you will always be capped. But once you learn to multiply value through products, systems, and platforms, there is no ceiling. And that's the ultimate truth. Wealth doesn't belong to the hardest worker. It belongs to the highest contributor. If you want to rise beyond the middle class, learn to create value that solves real problems and then multiply it to reach more people than you could ever touch alone. That's the bridge between where you are and where you could be. So let me leave you with this. The middle class works for money, but the wealthy make money work for them by creating and multiplying value. When you commit to becoming a person of increasing value, money will never be your master again. It will become your servant. If shifting your mindset sets the stage and creating and multiplying value builds momentum, then the next step is learning how to leverage systems, capital, and people. Because here's the undeniable truth. No one builds lasting wealth alone. The middle class often prides itself on self-reliance, on doing everything by themselves. But self-reliance is a survival strategy, not a wealth strategy. Wealth is never the result of isolated effort. It is the result of leveraged effort. Think about leverage for a moment. The principle of leverage is simple. A small force, applied correctly, can move something far greater than itself. That's what Archimedes meant when he said, "Give me a place to stand and a lever long enough and I will move the world." In wealth, leverage is the multiplier. Without it, your results are capped by your own energy, your own time, your own ability. With it, your results compound far beyond what you could ever accomplish alone. Let's start with systems. A system is a repeatable structure that delivers predictable results. Middle-class thinking tends to resist systems because they seem rigid, but in reality, systems are what create freedom. When you have a system for sales, you don't need to reinvent your pitch every time. When you have a system for customer delivery, you don't need to scramble for consistency. Systems free your brain from managing chaos so you can focus on scaling vision. In wealth, systems are non-negotiable. They are what separate a hustler from a builder. A hustler relies on effort, a builder relies on design. But systems alone won't take you all the way. You also need capital. The middle class relationship with money is often defensive. They save, they conserve, they protect. The wealthy, by contrast, deploy capital. They treat money as a soldier that goes out, fights battles, and brings back reinforcements. Capital, when invested strategically, multiplies itself. Whether it's reinvested into marketing to reach more customers, into assets that produce cash flow, or into innovations that create new streams of revenue, capital becomes an accelerator. The middle class often fears using capital because they see it only as something to spend or lose. The wealthy understand that capital is meant to be circulated, multiplied, and put to work. And then there are people. This may be the most misunderstood form of leverage because many in the middle class see hiring or partnering as an expense instead of an investment. But people, when aligned with vision, are the greatest multiplier of all. One person can only hold so many conversations in a day, but a team can carry the message to thousands. One person can only see a problem from their own perspective, but a group can see it from every angle. And when you empower people not just to work for you, but to own the vision with you, their creativity, energy, and commitment multiply your results far beyond what your hands alone could ever accomplish. This is where leadership becomes essential. If you want to leverage people, you must become someone worth following. That doesn't mean barking orders or micromanaging. It means creating trust, casting vision, and cultivating growth. A good leader creates workers. A great leader creates leaders. And wealth at scale always requires leaders who multiply leaders. That's why the wealthiest entrepreneurs are not just managers of businesses, they are cultivators of talent. Now, here's where all three systems, capital, and people converge. Imagine building a system that runs without your constant oversight. Imagine using capital to fuel that system so it reaches further and scales faster. And imagine surrounding yourself with people who not only manage the system, but innovate on it, refine it, and expand it. That's the formula for wealth. That's how businesses grow from side hustles into empires. But let's confront the fear again, because this is what often keeps the middle class from leverage. They fear losing control. They fear risking capital. They fear trusting people. And so they cling tightly to what they can do on their own, never realizing that this clinging is the very thing holding them back. Wealth requires release. You must release tasks into systems, release money into investments, release trust into people. Yes, there are risks. Yes, not every system works. Not every investment returns. Not every person delivers. But the alternative is to stay small, capped by your own limitations. Psychologically, leverage requires humility. It requires admitting you cannot do it all, you do not know it all, and you are not meant to carry it all. But humility is the soil in which greatness grows. Because once you embrace leverage, your work becomes multiplied, your vision becomes magnified, and your impact becomes exponential. So let me ask you, are you building a business that depends on you, or are you building a business that functions without you? Because if your success collapses the moment you stop working, you don't own a wealth engine, you own a job. And jobs, no matter how well paying, do not create freedom. Systems do, capital does, people do. Here's the bottom line. Leverage is the great separator between middle-class limitation and wealthy expansion. Without it, you remain capped by your own strength. With it, you step into exponential possibility. So remember this, the middle class relies on themselves. The wealthy rely on leverage. If you want to move from one to the other, you must master systems, deploy capital, and empower people. Because when you learn to multiply your effort through leverage, wealth is no longer a dream, it becomes inevitable. We've talked about mindset, about creating and multiplying value, and about leveraging systems, capital, and people. But let me tell you something many don't want to hear. Making money is only half the battle. The other half is learning how to manage it, multiply it, and direct it with wisdom. Because the truth is, wealth doesn't just test your skills, it tests your character. And the test comes in the form of stewardship. Stewardship means more than just managing money. It means being intentional with it. It means understanding that every dollar you hold is not just a piece of paper or a digital number, but a tool, a seed of responsibility. The middle class often thinks wealth is simply about earning more. But history has shown us that earning more without stewardship leads to the same outcome as earning less, being broke, being stressed, and being unprepared for the future. Without stewardship, money slips through your hands no matter how much you make. Let's talk about why. Psychologically, many people carry broken money patterns into their adult lives. Some grew up with scarcity, believing they must cling to every penny. Others grew up with excess consumption, believing money exists only to be spent as soon as it arrives. Both patterns are dangerous because both keep you from wealth. Scarcity traps you in fear, never allowing your money to grow. Consumption traps you in cycles, never allowing your money to stay. But stewardship creates flow. It balances caution with courage, saving with investing, living for today with preparing for tomorrow. Philosophically, stewardship is about understanding that money is not an end. It's a means. It's not the destination. It's the vehicle. And like any vehicle, it must be directed with purpose. Without direction, it crashes. With purpose, it transports you to places you never imagined possible. That's why wealthy people don't just ask, how much did I earn this year? They ask, where is my money working for me? How is it multiplying? What impact is it creating? And this is where the middle class often misses the mark. They are taught to save, which is good, but saving alone will never make you rich. If your money sits idle, it shrinks under inflation. Stewardship isn't just about keeping, it's about multiplying. The wealthy don't just save, they invest. They put their money into assets that produce income. Real estate, businesses, intellectual property, investments that generate returns while they sleep. They know that money is meant to work harder than they do. Now let's connect this to generosity, because stewardship without generosity becomes hollow. True wealth isn't just measured by what you accumulate, but by what you contribute. When you give strategically, you create impact beyond yourself. And here's the paradox: generosity doesn't subtract from wealth, it multiplies it. Money that flows outward tends to find its way back, often multiplied, because generosity expands networks, builds trust, and creates goodwill. Generosity is not just a moral principle, it's an economic one. But let me be clear, generosity doesn't mean recklessness. It means giving with wisdom, just as you invest with wisdom. It's not about throwing money at problems, it's about directing resources where they can create the most transformation. When you combine stewardship with generosity, you don't just build wealth, you build legacy. And legacy is wealth that outlives you, wealth that impacts generations, wealth that proves money was never your master, but your servant. So ask yourself, how are you currently stewarding what you already have? Are you treating money as something to spend, or as something to multiply? Are you hoarding it in fear? Or are you directing it with vision? Because money is always moving. The only question is whether it is moving in circles that keep you stuck or in cycles that set you free. This is why the wealthy look at money differently. To them, every expense is either consumption or investment. Consumption ends the moment you spend. Investment continues long after you spend. If you want to escape the middle class trap, You must begin filtering every financial decision through this lens. Will this purchase grow my wealth or will it diminish it? Will this choice expand my future or will it only satisfy my present? And here's where discipline comes in. Because stewardship requires saying no to many things so you can say yes to the right things. It requires the discipline to delay gratification, the patience to let investments grow, the wisdom to diversify, and the courage to give generously even when it feels uncomfortable. Stewardship is not a passive act, it's an active discipline. So let me leave you with this: wealth is not proven by what you earn, it's proven by what you keep, what you multiply, and what you give. If you can learn to direct your money with wisdom, to multiply it through assets, and to release it through generosity, then money will never control you. You will control it. And when you control it, you gain the freedom to build, to impact, and to leave behind something greater than yourself. Remember this: making millions may change your life, but storing millions changes generations. The middle class thinks about income. The wealthy think about legacy. Which one will you choose?